What do you mean I have to increase 50 levels for the next fight? What do you mean I have to increase 4000 levels for the next fight?
Ah, shit. Here we go again.
Hey everyone, it is time to check Phantom Brave, the Lost Hero. Be sure to check timestamps in case you are interested in something. Without further ado, let's dive into the usual topics: story, gameplay, graphics, and music. Phantom Brave, the Lost Hero is the continuation from Phantom Brave. If you wanna check that game, the PC port is quite good. Now, if you ask, do I have to play the first game to get this one? No, but you don't have to. Of course, if you want to understand Marona's and Ash's story, yeah, but aside from that, you can jump into this entry without missing much. Because the first cinematics explain about some previous events, but also about the people who inhabit this world. And yep, phantoms exist too, but most of times they are not able to interact with the living, and this is where Marona comes into play, as she is able to communicate with them. And well, she lives with Ash, character who died along with Marona's parents in the first game, but for different reasons he stayed as a phantom, protecting Marona. Before all of this, our heroine was despised because she was able to talk with phantoms, but after helping many people and of course saving the day, she's considered a hero. Jumping some scenes later, Marona and Ash find themselves in the midst of a strange phenomenon, where phantoms start to attack the ship they were sailing on. And unfortunately for our duo, Marona gets captured, and part of her power gets taken by this new antagonist. Fortunately, Ash is there to save Marona, and without thinking too much, he throws her out of the ship. That is how Apricot finds Marona on the beach, and prays for her to be found by someone. Of course, right away a group of pirates catches up and help our heroine. These pirates are quite cocky, but Marona decides to help them, until she hears that they are stealing. However, in her current state, there isn't much to do, so that is how she gets to meet Apricot, who is easily scared, and she explains that her father sailed to fight the shipwreck fleet, but since then she hasn't seen him. While exchanging words, they empathize with one another, and they decide to be the current Argento fleet leader, as they shouldn't steal, and from here the adventure starts to gear up. Now, what can I say for future events? I found this story switching between goofy, teaching important lessons, and sad moments. Needless to say why there are a lot of goofy interactions, but what I liked a lot is that they challenge interesting ideas, as not giving your life because of a job, or using your position as an excuse to sacrifice yourself. It is through words that you get to solve many issues, as Marona shares her previous experiences where sometimes there were misunderstandings, and like that, different ideas are shared. While I know they can be seen as something trivial, I enjoy them. And down the line, the whole cast has to find the answers of what they are hiding within themselves, and of course, fight against those issues or complexes. As for the sad topics, after hearing Apricot's story, all the things she had to go through, and then be left behind for some years without contact, to me it was like, yeah, no wonder why she's scared by everything and constantly doubting herself. Now, these sad conversations don't happen all the time, but in the second half of the main story they start to appear more often. Of course, I will say that this is not an overly serious story. I would give it an 8. It was a good tale, with an enjoyable cast of characters, and parts that definitely squished my heart. Gameplay-wise, this is a strategic RPG where you need to create several characters to go through the chapters. You will find new units as you advance in the main story, where you are going to get some specific classes, as fighters, thieves, magicians, and some monsters, literally the ones you fight. At first, I don't recommend you to focus so much on this, as you will have plenty of units later, and training all of them takes a good chunk of time, so try to make some initial choices and from there decide which ones you like the most. Personally, I loved my thief character, as she was able to plunder almost every item, and that gives you a lot of options down the line. Perhaps the MVP in this whole mess was my Vanguard, as she is able to cover your whole team when you can see that little green symbol, so she tanked almost everything for a lot of time. It is worth mentioning that some units have to be unlocked by finishing some quests, like these ones. And also keep in mind that some units are glass cannons. They may feel broken, but one shot happen quite often. There are some other details to keep in mind, but let's jump into the battles. Here you need to confine your allies on different items. I recommend you to take some time checking what's around and what gives you the best bonuses or what's worth plundering. These items have the chance to give you special bonuses or invincible status, so always pay attention. They are easy to identify as they have that kind of flying link. Once you confine your character, they have a set number of turns. In general, they have 3 or 4 turns. After that, they disappear. However, you can use Marona to give extra turns or make them act faster. And as any other strategic game, position is key, but don't worry that much. If you ask me about the general difficulty, I will say it is between easy and normal. And even if the enemies have lots of levels above, you may have the advantage as the AI isn't that good, sometimes getting stuck in some places or simply attacking other units that will definitely survive different attacks. So if you're looking for a normal difficulty, yep, it is good. If you want something more like XCOM or Fire Emblem, either in hard or lunatic difficulty, you better look into another direction. On that front, I saw game over 3 times, but I was stretching my luck way too much. What is cool is that the general gameplay is so wacky, that I liked it a lot. I mean, sometimes you can avoid attacks by jumping on top of allies or some areas, and as every attack has an area of effect, you can get away with lots of random things. The same principle applies to the enemy, but then again, they don't do that kind of things that often. What can be a bit frustrating is that sometimes you need to manage some attacks by pixels, which turns a bit complicated, so you need to move with so much patience, unless you want to hit your allies. And on that front, every weapon has, let's say, specific moves, and there are 2 kinds of attacks, for single targets and multi-targets. Just keep that in mind while choosing weapons. And I cannot stress this enough, do not underestimate that some of these moves have defense or resistance as a scaling attribute. On the other hand, if you learn to exploit those details, you can destroy enemies really fast. And this is a good moment to go back and check our units in more detail. Every character has a different kind of growth and specific skills, but don't worry that much. For the main story, there's no need to use scrolls for extra skills or reclassing or getting the best gear. What's really important is the kind of weapon you equip. The game shows which weapon works the best, but that isn't a must. At the end of the day, you can equip whatever. You can also see their general attributes. It is possible to increase them by having a specific something, but it takes some time, so better focus on what they excel the most. Now, scaling and stuff like that is quite interesting, because the random items you find around sometimes have amazing stats, so do not neglect rocks or flowers, as they can increase stats like mad. That is how my vanguard was able to beat countless enemies. It is fair to say that all of this has RNG, so maybe you will find better luck with fighters, dragons or other units. Now, the main flow of the game is kinda similar. Go check a new area, select the stage, and that's it. Reach the post content and holy Jesus, 4000 levels! Yeah, okay, in this point you have multiple options at hand. Get a lot of money so you can change the balance of the juice at the bar, or you can get extra experience. Use the main ship, and for the love of God increase levels, so you can gather extra experience. If you want to get decent items, level up your merchant and granny, as they will help a lot down the line. And most importantly, farm and farm and farm, as scrolls and things like that have a lot of RNG, and the best is to farm eggs and books against some bosses, and exploit every little opportunity you see. I will argue that you don't need to match levels perfectly well, if you have the right skills, items and team composition, but of course the grind becomes mental, and unfortunately stagnant. However, there are some interesting things down the line for fans of some niche franchises. And keep in mind that when you're starting grinding sessions, jumping into dungeons is a good idea. Before that, I don't really recommend it, but man, be prepared with everything you have, because sometimes there are no items to confine and there will be like 20 enemies around you, so they can gang on your team real bad. And, well, most likely you will end up frustrated. For me, its gameplay is an 8.5. Truth being told, I really enjoyed the journey, the different areas and multiple options to play down the line. What this game needed was a difficulty setting, since the beginning, and better enemy AI. to truly exploit every little opportunity, or at least most of them. In the graphics section I check glitches, game performance, general creativity and stuff like that. This is the Switch version of the game. And I have to say, if possible, avoid this version. It is poorly optimized. It isn't unplayable or terribly bad as other games I have shown in the worst RPGs I have played, but for starters, the game kicked me around 13 times, at least as of the making of this video. Fortunately, 11 of them happened on the menu, and there are autosaves, so they help a lot. But at this point I am starting to wonder what the heck happens with the strategy games and getting frozen here and there. XCOM 2, Other Side and this game, it is like a kind of curse. Now, issues do not end there, as you can easily see that hair or certain animations, shadows and stuff like that look quite ugly. Oftentimes while moving around, it can be quite troublesome, as it turns laggy, and this can lead to a lot of fatal mistakes when you need to pass around certain areas or the border of the map. It doesn't go that slow every single time, but it happens every now and then. And the last problem is that if you press the Switch menu at any moment, the background music will stop playing once you get back into the game. So yeah, if you are in a battle, no more background music. If you are in a scene, no more scene music. This can be a bit annoying as sometimes I am not able to fully play a map. So worst case scenario, I have to get into the menu almost at the beginning of the fight. And congratulations, monotonous 10 minutes of combat. With all of this, it is not unplayable. But I decided to choose this version because in my mind it was like, it is a strategic RPG, they don't need to move like butter on bread. Of course, a decent butter. So, choices were taken. Mea culpa. If it runs kinda smoothly on PS, then yeah, by all means I recommend those versions. Aside from that, the general art of the game was of my liking. It is clear to see that these kinds of executions have been persistent through many NES games, like Disgaea, Labyrinth of Refrain, Monster Menu, or some others, just to mention recent titles. Of course, they are not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but in general there is that charming anime style with big eyes, lack of nose, and colorful environment as well as general aesthetics. And looking at the maps, for what they are, there are interesting elements, like sandstorms, rain or blizzards, plus of course the map execution. It is unfortunate, but the previous issues mentioned diminish the experience. It is a 5. If it were not because of those details, I would have given it somewhere like 7.5 or 8, but I cannot overlook these kinds of issues. And last but not least, its music. Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero has little over 30 tracks, where the general execution feels like a clown show, in a good sense. But this kind of baroque composition hits while talking with other characters or some menus. At some point they also remind me a lot to Super Mario RPG, because of how they sound, particularly the track named Moment of Peace, quite short but really charming. Now some of you know that I love to listen to video game music, and this one hit me quite hard. Because while playing I didn't pay that much attention as sometimes I was with my family, so I kept a mid-low volume. But once I went into my turtle cave to listen to the melodies, you know, preparation is key. I let that passionate violin track play and I was like, dude, this is so freaking beautiful! In all seriousness, if you can give it a check, do it. I am not entirely sure if it is just fusion because of how it sounds, but considering how NES delivers these kinds of entries, be my guest. The thing is that if you are into classical, baroque and some improvisation in between, I'm sure you are going to love this OST. And it doesn't finish there, because tracks like Freezing Rain, Grains of Sun, Blitz, Last Strings hit the same. Yeah, some change into classical approaches, but they were extraordinary. If I have a complaint, it's that there are few combat tracks. I know there is always that hunger for what you really enjoy, but a few extra tracks with the same quality would have been extraordinary. As for the general sounds of the game, I like them. I played the game with Japanese voices, and the voice actors definitely delivered an amazing job. I enjoyed that. For example, Apricot in the first half of the game is scared, as I explained in the story section. At first you will listen her scream like, "Oh Jesus Chrysler, no!" But in the second half, there is that noticeable change in her words and expressions, details that add a lot here. I would give the general soundtrack a 9. Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero final score is a 7.6. Despite technical issues, with all honesty I will say this game is a lot of fun. Nonetheless, even with that score, I do recommend it. The truth is that I enjoy this game. Yes, it lacks in some areas like the enemy AI, and that it goes bonkers on the post-content. But even if you keep it in the main story, I will say, it was worth playing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.